Hello everyone, and welcome back to another book review. Today I'm going to be reviewing Basilisks and Beowulf, Monsters in the Anglo-Saxon World by Tim Flight. So this book was very interesting. This was a 4-star read for me. I really enjoyed this book, and obviously the content of the book is pretty self-explanatory. Monsters in the Anglo-Saxon World. This book does skew a little bit more academic as opposed to maybe popular reading, so we do a lot more deeper dives. It's not just like a superficial look at this cool dragon, moving on. There's a lot of analysis of the text that the monsters come from, and Tim Flight really does a really good job of diving into those texts. So this book covers some of the monsters that were talked about or present in the Anglo-Saxon world, and we can get information about them from various texts. The book covers a number of monsters. For example, they cover wolves, they cover whales, they cover demons and their interaction with the Christian saints. And then there's a large section of the book, so like 2 chapters at least, which cover Beowulf and the monsters in Beowulf, and also a very interesting take about whether or not Beowulf himself is a monster. The book really places a lot of emphasis on boundaries. So monsters were used in the Anglo-Saxon world to kind of delineate, or the Anglo-Saxon world had very clear boundaries between what was civilized and therefore Christian, and therefore where monsters shouldn't be, versus the wild, the unknown, the foreign, the uncivilized, the pagan. So there was kind of this differentiation between it, and monsters clearly were in the realm of that area. So that's where the pagan, the uncivilized area, I should say. So that's where animals such as whales were perceived as monsters because the sea was so foreign and unknowable, and because we had some biblical allegory with like Jonah and the whale, or the sea monster or whatever. So we have that boundary, and a lot of this book was talking about animals so monsters would either be in those areas, in which case humans would go in and interact with the monsters that lived in the area, and that was the case with saints. So saints, they've talked about one saint in particular who went to an island that was known to be uncivilized, as in opposition of the island where his I guess his monastery or whatever was from, which was considered civilized. It was Christian. So there was this other island that was not civilized and therefore not Christian. So that monk crossed the boundary into the wilderness, and while there he faced demons because, again, he was going into their territory, and there were the monsters there. But there were also some monsters that were monstrous. Well, they were monstrous before, but what was horrifying to the Anglo-Saxon world was that they crossed these boundaries. So these would be like wolves. Wolves were clearly the domain of wild, pagan, heathen, outside the Christian civilized world. And this is kind of reinforced in the Bible when Jesus makes comments about like his followers being like sheep, and a natural enemy of sheep are wolves. So we kind of have also this like Christian interplay going on, but the wolves were horrifying when they crossed into the human boundary. So when they made attacks on humans or livestock, they were leaving their natural, not Christian, like unchristian, uncivilized, pagan place in the thought of the Anglo-Saxon world, and crossing into their boundaries, or their world, crossing that boundary into their world, which is horrifying. And they had a word for this, Mearcstapan. I hope I'm saying that right. I believe it's an Old English word, Mearcstapan, and those were boundary like crossers, people who would cross those boundaries. We also have boundary crossers in Beowulf in the Grendelkin, so Grendel and Grendel's mother, and those were monsters who did not stay in the place where they were supposed to be or where their natural place was in the world. They crossed that boundary into I think it was King Hrothgar's territory, and then attacked men. So they were these horrifying people who monsters who crossed those boundaries, and that's what made them terrifying. But Tim Flight makes a very interesting argument, which I hadn't thought of before, despite having read Beowulf before, that Beowulf himself might also be a monster. And he does delve into it, and kind of my takeaway was, although he is one of those Mearcstapan, so he is a boundary crosser, he's not a monster. The Mearcstapan, as a Mearcstapan, he can go into the area where the monsters are, and he's described as being very large, or he can wield very large swords, and he has this superhuman strength. But because his actions are in line with the Christian ideals, or because he doesn't act in a way that, I guess, is condemnable in Anglo-Saxon culture. He is not perceived as a monster the same way the Grendel kin are, even though they kind of are both those Mearcstapans, as in they're going across the boundaries that I guess good Anglo-Saxons would like to see observed. This was a really, really good book. If you're looking to go into a little deeper dive into Anglo-Saxon monsters, mythology, world, this would be a perfect book for you. I think this is a really, really interesting read, and I think the book got better the longer it went. So it didn't start out bad, but I was more intrigued the more I read, and I definitely would love to read more stuff either by Tim Flight or just in this kind of realm of, yeah, monsters in the Anglo-Saxon world. Very, very interesting, and I really enjoyed having a copy of some of the texts that he referred to open to kind of cross-reference. That's something I would recommend doing. So I had a copy of Beowulf that I had open and I was referencing back and forth just to kind of get the full picture and read the lines myself that he was referring to. I thought that was really interesting. I think you would really enjoy this book. I gave it a 4-star read and I hope you check it out and give it a read soon. Other than that, everyone, I hope you have a great day.